All right, we're live. So, hi, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. Tonight, we continue our bi weekly conversation on the show with my frequent conversation partner, Chloe, aka Script Queen. Unfortunately, we are not able to have this stream 2 weeks ago. Some other things came up, and we're not able to have this stream. And I really want to apologize for those who were here then and waited. I think Christina Beng was in the chat and she was asking if the stream was not going to hold. Unfortunately, it didn't hold. But tonight we're going to be discussing the concept of social construction, and we would cover such areas as the definition of social construction, specific examples of social construction, such as money, countries, and gender, the role of nature versus nurture, and finally, we would also consider the shortcomings of the concept of social construction. But before we begin the conversation, kindly click the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, support the stream with super stickers and super chats, and support the channel on Patreon. And finally, you can join our Discord community via the link in the description box. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, Chloe, how have you been?
I've been good. Busy, but good.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since we had any sort of interaction, either via chat on the
Hmm.
Discord or a live stream. So you traveled for work. That was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, under duress. I tried to get out of
Under
it.
duress. All right. So explain under duress. What do you mean by that?
I was kind of forced into it. It was very, very last minute. I wasn't planning on it, but people who are in a higher pay grade really pushed for it, so I had no choice, or at least in order to keep my position, right? Not that they were threatening to fire me. It's just like, it's like, yeah, you need to go out there, and it's like, do I really have to? And they're like, yeah, we really want you to. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So
So you didn't have a choice in the matter, and it was a matter of
no,
the decision was made, and you have to go. You have to go along with it because the bosses have said so. The hierarchy has said so.
yeah, basically.
So how was the experience? Was it as bad as you envisaged, or did it turn out to
Yeah,
be?
basically 2 days of travel. You know, 2 days of travel. All the work that I was planning on doing kind of put to a halt, and all these things for a 2-hour meeting. Um, is kind of anticlimactic for me. All of this for just sitting in a room for 2.5 hours and then
Are
leaving.
you serious? So, okay,
Oh
so
yeah,
for a 2 hours
I'm
meeting,
serious.
was it absolutely necessary for that meeting to be a physical meeting? Could it have been done via
It
um,
turns out it turns out it could have been virtual. It could have been virtual the whole time. And I was frustrated when I got there when they said that. And I'm like, I hate everybody. Or they said something like, "Oh, no one asked for a phone, like to call in." I'm like, I totally asked, and so it means the manager that pushed it in didn't relay that information because he really wanted me to be there in person. So that was the frustrating part.
so why was he so keen having
It's
you be there?
there are some theories about the contract and yada 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 and face to face interaction and meeting people and someone else thinks it's promotion type of material type of stuff. So I don't know. In the moment it was inconvenient.
Hmm. Well, if it's towards promotion, I think it's a worthy inconvenience.
Yeah, it's just in the moment it just was not enjoyable.
All right, social construction. So before we before I ask you your thoughts on what you think the definitions, or what you think social construction is, I have a definition here which I just want to read out. It says a social construct is a concept that exists not in objective reality but as a result of human interaction. It exists because humans agree that it exists. Social constructionism is a theory in sociology, social ontology, and communication theory, which proposes that certain ideas about physical reality arise from collaborative consensus instead of pure observation of said reality. Social constructionism posits that phenomena do not have an independent foundation outside the mental and linguistic representation of that people develop about them throughout their history, and which becomes their shared reality. So, what do you think about that definition? Do you think it captures the essence of what social constructionism is, or
I
you
mean,
have another angle to it?
yeah, I mean, yeah, part of it that definitely I agree with. There are certain things that only really exist because we are social, right? A conversation only exists because two people are talking. Objectively, it's just, you can talk to a wall, but that's not a conversation, right? Um, and so, like money, the concept of bankruptcy, the concept of whatever, these things are kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine, or it's interconnected structure of how we socialize that produce other phenomenon that only exist because other people are participating in these things that we have made for ourselves. Um, but but for some, on a certain level, these things do respond to us because we do have an innate physical like there's an innate need or an ability for sir to want like human interaction, right? It is like how good a conversation is going. If what is a good conversation versus a bad conversation, that's a social construction, but there is a basic innate human need for human connection that is based in physical reality. So I guess I wouldn't necessarily agree with the idea that some of these things are completely divorced from physical reality. Um, but it's kind of like you can layer a lot of stuff on something until it has its own um it can stand up under its own weight, even though the things underneath it aren't as strong or as prominent as what we have built on top of it.
Okay, so now considering the way you just put it, some people would say that, well, things don't really exist. They're only made up based on our interactions, the way human beings interact. And the example you gave of a conversation is a social construction, but it's also built on something which is the reality, which is the physical reality of speech. You
Mhm.
understand? Speaking is an objective human characteristic. So even though a conversation is socially constructed, but it is not that conversation itself is not built on nothing. It's built on something objective. So a lot of the time I see when I hear the word social construction and people say, oh, this is the social construction. So it's not real. It can be changed. It can be fluid. It can be this or that. I see it as not being totally true because it didn't just come out of thin air. It probably is a representation of something in the physical reality. But this is the way we can be able to convey it from one mind to the other, so that it is understandable. You understand? Because they these things called social constructions, to me, they are descriptive of a process or something that is based in objective reality. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the analogies that like when a lot of my friends were trans, right? Basically, the concept of gender, why is it important? And they like at that time they agreed that the concept of gender was important in the same way of, it is a social construction as to traffic lights, right? What does red represent, green, yellow, the arrows, what they represent. We have decided what those things mean, but there are consequences if we don't follow the traffic lights. If we just, see red means go, it is acknowledging a physical reality of why we have that social construct, because we are acknowledging traffic accidents could happen and we have to have a set of rules in order to organize ourselves so that we don't have accidents. And same thing with, in a lot of cultures and societies, gender roles, right? Because you probably don't want a pregnant woman on the front line of a battle, right? So we have put them socially into a different category so that they aren't going to be there, or they're not going to be in, they're not typically expected to be in certain places. And that's also based off of their physical reality. You probably want very highly aggressive people entering in and into, being soldiers, as opposed to extremely social, highly passive people. Then we're going to socially categorize them in a different place. And that could be on gender or, temperament lines, right? We It's not even just on, type of, we don't even just categorize people on terms of, gender, which is based off of sex largely, but, temperament, like we do make assumptions about people based off of their physicality. And we probably, it's probably not a good fit to push someone who is, 3 feet tall to go into the NBA, right? um, and so we have to have these concepts. And again, they are, I think, largely based off of something that is real, because, or else why would it, or else that rule wouldn't matter, right? If I made up a game that no one plays, and I say there are boobas and hoovas and whatever, and I have this whole imaginary world, I can suddenly change those rules on the fly because it doesn't impact or change anything. And only when those categories or maybe actually apply to things that actually affect reality and affect people's lives, then those things kind of become harder to change, because it affects the working world, like how the world works, how we interact with it, how we actually, move forward and get things done, um, how we organize our interactions with each other, which are real, but like the rules that we kind of, you know, the order of operations, yeah, I can, at a certain point, it probably was arbitrary, or maybe at a certain point, there were certain kind of set this order of operations that we're not even aware of anymore. And so we're kind of lost the sense of what was this based off of. So because of our ignorance, we think it's based off of nothing, right? Um, so I have a pretty interesting example, and that is train tracks, right? And I think train tracks around the world are basically they're kind of the very specific width everywhere, right? And but why is it that width? And if you kind of go back into time, the width of the train tracks are actually based off of the width of a cart, of a horse-drawn cart. So, to us, we think like, well, why we have these widths? Like, we could just change it, whatever, for any reason. But we are still, building on the past, and the past, turned out in a certain way for a certain reason, which is why, we have to keep building on it, and it will take an enormous amount of effort to suddenly radically change it and to get everyone on the same page.
Yep. So I would like us to explore gender next. But before we explore gender, you said something about color,
Mm-hmm.
um, red and blue and all that. Now, some people might look at that and say, why is red being called red? I mean, we could call blue red and it will still be blue, right? I mean, the words red and blue themselves they are they are not objective, in the sense that you could literally use blue. If we all agree today to say we're going to call blue red and red blue, it will become those colors. But underneath all that, you know that there is a distinction between blue and red. And for the fact that you switch the names doesn't make them the same thing. You understand? So even though the words themselves, it's uh, would I say arbitrary or made up, but they also serve a distinctive purpose. They serve to distinguish features, they serve to distinguish things that are objectively real and that are factual, that are based in reality and are not made up. So while the descriptive terms might be made up, but the things that they represent are true, they're objective, and they're real. So let's take it to gender. Now, for gender, you know, I think there was a progression of things. First of all, it was gender roles that was regarded as being socially constructed, and then it wasn't enough anymore. It is now gender. In fact, I think they're even going to the point where it is now sex that is socially constructed. So let's
Mm-hmm.
take it one at a time, and we see how it was necessary for gender roles actually arise. You gave the example of how it's not feasible for a pregnant woman to be at the front lines. Now you may say that's an arbitrary socially constructed activity why you would want men to be at the front lines and not the pregnant women. But you do know for a fact that you know one of the purpose of war is to kill and not to get killed. I mean, to kill the opponent and try as much as possible not to get killed. Understand? And to achieve that goal, you need those who are best suited to um, best suited to that endeavor. So even if there is no way it is written somewhere that if a pregnant woman shouldn't go to the front lines, just based off of the reality, based off of the outcome that could happen, it only makes sense for certain things to be constructed in a certain way. That okay, you know what, women shouldn't be at the front lines. Maybe the younger men should be at the front lines in terms of war and all that. Well, we all look at that today and we say to ourselves, oh, that's nonsense, that's arbitrary, that there's no objective reason why human beings came up with such things in the first place. Even the gender roles in terms of cooking, in terms of hunting and all that, the same thing applies. So it seems as if technology, because technology has been able to bridge some of these gaps between the sexes, some, not all of them, we now want to apply, we want to, when I say posthumously apply the standards of today and apply it across time and say, you know what, we've been wrong all this while. We've been doing these things the wrong way because they're arbitrary, they're not based on reality, they're just made up. So we can change them at a whim.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize how modernity has made a lot of things very, very equal. And so to make things a lot like and out of convenience, right? I remember there was someone I worked with who, I'll say this, he was very I would say he was kind of unhealthy. He was not physically fit or well or anything like that. And one thing that happened was something happened. I think he lost power in his garage or something like that. And he was very, very shocked that his neighbor, who was like a 23-year-old woman, like, a normal size, woman, who that she could lift, she actually was able to lift his garage door so that he would be able to pull out. And she's like, oh, I didn't think she would be able to lift that, right? And that's because we have engineered these things so that you don't have to be a massive, big, strong man to basically operate basic things in your home that you've purchased. But that requires a lot of designing, engineering, a lot of technology has been put into these things so that there's no difference between, like, if a man types up a letter versus a woman types up a letter and they're told to type the same thing, there's really no functional difference. And so a lot of our world has kind of been smoothed over to reduce the at least the differences in terms of physicality for, a lot of the things that we interact with, like there's handicap parking, there is handicap access to, malls, stores, places of work. And so we are used to things not mattering in terms of a physical, in terms of like a physical way. But still, there are a lot of jobs and roles that do require you to be quite physical, right? And
Yeah,
and I think like firefighting, right? It makes sense that mostly men do that, and that a woman probably would not be able to keep up, and also might become a liability if she were to not be physically able to carry out a man, and then she has to be rescued herself by her coworkers, right? And so it makes sense that there are those physical requirements, and that men are more likely they would want to get the strongest people in order to do that job, right? And that most likely would probably be a man to do those jobs. And so men will most likely do those jobs. And also, in terms of risk and, willing to risk your life for someone else. And, men are more likely to participate in risky behavior just in general. And we can use roles, we can have roles that use that to their benefit. But I think ultimately, if we don't, in general, if we don't give men like an outlet to expend their risk-taking behavior, we get stuff like jackass.
Yeah. Now, talking about some of the behavioral differences between men and women, I think that men and women take different routes, and even though they're heading towards the same destination or will ultimately get to that same destination, they might take different routes. So there was this incident that happened in my country. It was in a gas station, and there were people inside a bus, and the bus caught fire. And as immediately the bus caught fire, there were people around, both men and women. They were all around, and you could notice the responses of both sexes or both genders was totally different. While the women ran away from the fire, you could see the young men rushing towards the fire, trying to break up the windows to get people out of it. Now, those women that ran away, they didn't just run away. They ran to get help. They ran to get more people to come and help, douse the fire or to get people out of the bus. But you can see that the approaches were sort of different. So when you look at that, that was a spur of the moment thing. That was you didn't have time to think. You just had to react on instinct. And the instincts of both sexes was sort of different, but geared towards the same goal. So when you look at something like that, how can you ever spin it to say that those behaviors were socially modeled, they were socially constructed, and it had nothing to do with some innate biological um, you know proclivities.
Yeah, some people would say it's how people are raised, right? And I can see some of that argument of if someone is raised to never get their hands dirty, and then they're encountering a situation where they have to mess up their clothes. I think, regardless of gender, right? They're going to be hesitant to that, right? The things that we learn in our childhood do affect our behaviors. But yeah, in that type of situation, even a conscious understanding, right, of like a woman, and like if a guy would understand that he has the physical capability more so than probably a woman to actually pull someone out. But if there was a situation in which a woman had to pull someone out, I'm pretty sure that she would do the same. But because they knew that there were men who were rushing towards, they knew that they had the ability to go get help, so that both, you can take both lines of action, because there's like fight or flight, right? But the best case scenario is that you can do possibly both. You're not limited because you have two different types of people within society. You're not limited to go only down one route. You can actually do both at the same time, because two types of people you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. And that's to me, that is kind of a purpose of a lot of, like, gender roles in general, because at least you understand who's going to do what. There's no debate, there's no fighting or tension as to, no, I want to do this, but I want to do that, I want to do this, whatever. A lot of times, it seems like in the past, when people got married, they didn't even have to have a debate as to who was going to do, like, who's going to go out and work, and who's going to do the laundry, who's going to balance the checkbook, who's going to be the interface to purchase a new car, because they kind of understood what would work better based off of, one, how their upbringing, why did they get together. They saw the traits that they wanted, that they didn't have in themselves, in the other person. And that's the best case scenario. You get together and then you basically leverage both of your strengths, and you're less you don't have to rely on your weaknesses as much if you're alone. So, but today, with this whole idea of like everyone could be anything and everything, I think it seems like sometimes it causes a lot more tension. Yes, babes. You probably can hear that. Uh, because people are fighting for to do something, and sometimes it seems like they're fighting to do a role just for the sake of it, just for the sake of mixing it up, and not really having a really good solid reason as to why they need to do something, as opposed to I think I'm the best at doing this, and therefore I should do it. Right. When people say like, oh, well, there just should be a person of color in this role. well, do you think, people from this cultural background actually have the ability to do this job better than someone else from a different cultural background? If you don't have that answer, then it's arbitrary, and people are losing sight as to why certain quote unquote social constructions exist, is that they exist based off of a real actual a need in reality.
Yeah, it seems as if your cat needs some attention. Is she hungry or is he hungry or something?
She just wants attention.
Oh, quality attention. Anyway, so now there is a scenario where I could see women definitely rushing towards that danger. If a woman's child was in that, if her baby was in that bus, I will tell you almost
Mhm.
certain that she's going to run towards that bus, whether or not whether or not her life was in danger. You understand? So this would be the same person having two different responses to the same situation because somehow our maternal instinct just kicks in and she's like, you know what, my kid is in there. I have to go get this kid. I have to do that. Um, Now, in terms of erasure of differences, when I was growing up, there was this thing that was very, very strong: division of labor, division of labor. I think in economics, then we taught division of labor that it's good, it helps productivity, it helps how output when there is a division of labor where you have people who are specialized in a specific task. You know, they focus their attention, their time to bring out the best result in that. But it seems like we're moving away from that now, where we're having a sort of a generic everyone can do everything, everyone should do everything. You think that that's the best way, that's the best path forward for us in terms of how we achieve certain things? Because if you look at the way men and women are designed, as a classical example, they're designed to be complementary. You get, but when you now say, well, no, either can do any of the things. So the strengths that the woman is supposed to bring and the strengths that the man is supposed to bring, they're no longer relevant. The man is supposed to have both the strength of a man and the strength of a woman, and the woman is supposed to have both the strength of a man and the strength of a woman. How how does that what does that tell us about the progression of human society?
I mean, honestly, it just seems like it's rushing towards mediocrity, because if everyone is like, there's nothing, like, you would expect, some people to be better at you at something, then, or else you would just do it. And then everyone is obligated to do everything and not need anybody. And or you're constantly relying on someone who is just as good at you, but you're relying on them to do a particular service. And in terms of economic, type of way, like, I would imagine that would greatly reduce customer service, because if I'm going to pay someone, I'm going to pay someone because they're an expert at something, and I don't know how to do it, and it will be too expensive for me to do it. But in a relationship, it's um you know you would want someone other than a mirror, I would say. Like, if you just want yourself, then you might as well just stay alone, right? Because you're never going to find exactly yourself, in all of your strengths and all of your weaknesses. And then also that kind of makes, your partner completely interchangeable. If everyone is the same, then why are you with each other?
That's a fantastic question. If everyone is the same, why are you with each other? that's that's a good question because I think many people don't think about that. Um, and for some couples, it now boils down to a matter of keeping scores. I mean, if I do 50% of this, you have to do 50% of that. Or if I change the diapers 5 times, then there's an obligation for the other person to change the diapers 5 times as well. Or if I do dishes, this X amount of time is required for the other person to do that. So when you look at that, doesn't it make human interactions much more monotonous, more rigid, um,
Mhm.
forced, regimented, instead of just flowing naturally from, well,
Yeah.
this is what I can do and this is what I love doing, and I just do it without any expectations that someone owes me a similar service.
Hmm. I mean, so I'll definitely give an example of an ex that I had, and I naturally did all the cooking, right? I naturally did all the cooking because, oh dear God, I would not feel safe with him in the kitchen. And I'll give you the story of where this is when I was in college, and basically I would use his apartment um, kitchen to cook, and of course, for this using his kitchen, of course he's going to get some of my food. And so I would just basically cook pasta and pasta sauce. That was like a normal one with cheese on it. Or I would cook a marinated steak and broccoli, or like fish and rice and broccoli is like a normal. It's just like very, very, very basic meals. And I guess he went to school he went to school in New York, and he had like a student apartment because he was a graduate student. And I guess he missed some stuff that I cooked, right? And so he called me on the phone and he said, well, I want to cook fish. And I'm like, okay, well, you need like a, a sheet, like like a cooking sheet, right? And he was like, I don't have one of those. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe you can go get like one of those, an old, like like a pie tin or something like that. And he's like, I have a piece of wood. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I have a piece of wood. And I'm like, do you mean like you have like one of those boards that you smoke fish on? He's like, no, I have a piece of wood from my cabinet. And I'm thinking like, oh no. And he's like, no. I'm like, no, you shouldn't do that because of the chemicals and just like the wood. And he's like, no, no, it's okay. I'll wipe it down with Windex first. And he was going to take a piece of board from his cabinet, wipe it down with Windex, put a piece of fish on it, and put it in the oven. And I just told him, you're not eating fish tonight. You're just not. Like these, like if this is how you're thinking of how cooking works, you should not like go to McDonald's, go do something else. Like this is not happening, because he was so far gone that I don't even think I could have walked him through how to do it right, because that's where his mind went, where it's okay, I'll wipe it down with Windex. Right. And so in that situation, when we were together, there was no way I was going to let him cook anything. Like for my health, for his health, like it just, so like people, like some people naturally have some
But Chloe, you were perpetrating the patriarchy by doing that. You were enabling him. I mean, you could
and
have you could have taught him how to cook. You could have made it a standing rule that, you know what, you need to get better at this. Even though you're shitty at it right now, you need to get better because this is a shared responsibility. So what the
it,
hell were you doing, Chloe? What
it
what
was
exactly were you?
his the thing is that his standards for food were so low that I really couldn't have taught it. I did try to teach him some things, but it just didn't stick. Like one time he tried to make pasta, and how he described what happened, I couldn't even understand how he did it that bad. I could not understand how he got the result.
You couldn't understand how he. It means that if he had done nothing at all, it would have been better than him doing something.
It
He
was,
had
well, I
he
mean,
had
like so, like you cook pasta and then you put in the pasta sauce and then that's it. He's like, none of the sauce is sticking to the pasta. And I'm like, how? I don't know how you did that. Like, does it still have the water in it? I don't know what happened. He had no instincts whatsoever on like the mechanics of cooking in general. Mostly what he ate was cheese sandwich. He ate ham sandwiches, and he cooked spaghettios. That's
as
it.
as a as an undergraduate, we had in my first year in school as an undergraduate, we had a roommate like that too, who had never cooked in his life. His first time was cooking was when he came to that room and that day, and we it was a group effort because we're all he would once the food is on the fire, he would run over to the other side to us and tell us that, okay, now what do I do next? What do I do next? And the ingredients he used, oh my God, the seasoning, he just packed seasoning, and he just packed the whole seasoning into that food. It was terrible that day. So imagine having to deal with someone like that and say, you know what, we have to share this responsibility. You're literally putting your hands or your life at risk because
Mhm.
the other person doesn't have those skills. But
Right.
but
And but like and you have to look at the purpose of like, is the purpose to like have everyone cook like a 5-star meal, right? Or is just the purpose of, hey, like what's the most effective way of getting a dinner on the table that is tastes good and doesn't kill you, right? And so like if that is what's decided of, we just want something that tastes good, and if someone can cook it more effectively, it would only be an extra thing. Okay, if you want to learn this too, that's something that a person wants to be better at, in terms of being able to, oh, I just want another skill, like in the same way that someone like, I would like to learn the guitar, right? That's someone's choice. But if they don't, let's be honest, like if they really don't have the aptitude to do it, and they're in a situation where they don't need to do it, it would you know put everyone at health to try to force them to do it when they probably should stay away from the kitchen.
mm, okay, so now let's take this conversation towards the nature versus nurture argument. Where do you stand in this argument?
Nature
Do you
versus
think nature, yeah, do you think nature plays a bigger role in the outcome, or you think nurture plays a bigger role in the outcome of
it I
of
would
any
I would
person?
I would say it depends on the situation, right? Like, like again, for cooking, for example, if because my dad, he's a perfectly fine cook, right? Like, and he would say that he was taught to cook. Like my grandfather could cook. It was a thing that was taught in the home, so that as an adult, he had no problem cooking or teaching me to cook, and my mom teaching me her, like, her recipes and everything like that. But for someone who just never had the opportunity, and that part of their, has never been solidified in their mind, I would say, yeah, like that. Some things like that is nurture, because there are some women who can't cook at all, right? Because they don't know. Like, did you ever see that video of that streamer who nearly burned down her house, and she didn't know how to put out a fire? Like, she like
Mm,
it,
that's just plain incompetence. That's
yeah.
just
Yeah, like she did not, like, I was like aware of like grease fires ever since I was like, I don't know, remember, probably 10 or so. So like, it's a so some things it is, I would think nurture. But like in terms of like nature, like, if someone just has like, sometimes it's musical ability. Some people just have that, they're able to be more musical or artistic because of a lot of things in their nature. There was like, a little girl that could make realistic, drawings ever since she was like 6, right? Like, I can't imagine someone teaching her that. Like, that was something that she had like an innate aptitude to. But yeah, some people can, like, through a lot of practice, learn to do that. So I would think it would change in the situation. But in general, like, for things like, someone, having a natural body that is stronger, that is faster, and they have the hormones that reduce their fear response, and they can act a little bit more impulsively and take more risks. The fact that people who have those attributes, the physical attributes, tend to choose to do things like that. I think that that's an example of something that's more nature versus nurture.
now. I think human development is a very strong indicator for the nature argument. Okay, for example, I look at my child, and when she does certain things, and I ask myself, no one actually taught her to do this thing. I mean, when she started sitting down, she if you give her a verbal command to sit down, she definitely is not going to understand. But somehow she was able to comport herself, and somehow she was able to stand up on her feet and just have that drive to move her feet and start walking. even with the number of times she fell on her, fell, she'll still get up and just move. And you ask yourself, what what drives the child to do those things? I mean, those are incredibly difficult things, and those are not things that you can teach. You can't teach any of those things to a child, but they just do it. Even speech, for example, how does the child understand any word when, I mean, they don't know these words, so there is no basis for them understanding it, but somehow they kind of just understand this is what it means, that is what it means. There is a strong nature component to that, and I think it plays, it plays out in, in so many other aspects of life as well. But of course, nurture also comes into the picture because human nature is can be modeled. We're not just basically animals. We're not just basically running on instincts. We can learn things. We can adapt to our environment, and even the environment can some way somewhat affect our biology, affect the expression of certain genes. So there is an interplay. There is an intermarriage of both factors to produce a unique individual or a unique event. But those who are proposing the strictly nurture argument want to, they want to sort of um, they de-emphasize the importance of nature in things like just, everything is the blank slate, and everything we become or most of what we become is as a result of social conditioning, which is absolutely not true.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree because a lot of the things that prompt us to maybe, do certain behaviors. And so let's say, like, the concept of, two people are accountants, right? One's a man, one is a woman, right? And they both have the same exact capability of doing the job, but there are certain things about them that would cause them to approach their career differently, right? Like if for example, if the woman got pregnant and she realized I really want to spend more time with my baby, she might decide to quit her job after the baby, or work part-time, and therefore that would change the outcome of, okay, if this guy doesn't necessarily have that crossroads type of decision. Or maybe I have seen people who they're really dedicated to their family, right? And like because of a death in the family or sickness, they choose to focus more on their family. But it is based off of something as to why they might make different decisions. And I think that, and then that, what is that based off of, right? That is based off of possibly a human drive of, to succeed, to compete, or to connect, or to focus on relationships that are more impactful to them, because people are more likely to, I don't know, care about their kids and their family at home as opposed to Karen from accounting, right? um, at work. So it's we who knows why we would prioritize the things that we and I think it's a lot of it's very innate, and some of it can be taught, right? Like some people say, like, well, I've learned not to focus so much on my career because I got laid off of this job randomly, and that means that the jobs don't care about me, so I'm gonna, like, change how my relationship with this job. Or someone's like, they can have a perfectly great job, but then it's like, hey, they have a natural opportunity in which they have created family and created connections that are biologically more important to them, and therefore they're going to change their decisions for that. So again, it's I wouldn't, like, I would be hard pressed to say it's 100% one or the other. It is a mixture, and in some things it is a higher mixture of one or the other. But at the end of the day, it's based off of the reality of who we are as people, as an individual, and how we're expressing our whatever is going on inside of us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Um, so the thing is, when you look at things like the example you gave about the woman, leaving a job and um, trying to go take care of a family, or someone leaving their jobs to go take care of the family and all that, you find out that most of the time it's usually tilts towards one gender is more likely to do something like that. To just, you know, this job is not so important. Let me go take care of my family. My family is more important. So, is it so difficult to understand that um, people of different sexes can be motivated by different things? That what motivates one of the sexes is quite different from what motivates the other sex, or is it also just socially constructed?
Yeah, I don't think that that's like, yeah, completely socially constructed. Because I mean, like, there's a lot of bonding, just physical bonding hormones when you push out a bowling ball out of your body. Like, you feel a lot of things, I'm pretty sure. Um, and and it's interesting. Like, yeah, sometimes I talk to some, like, I was talking to a guy at work, and I like we were talking about the difference between gender, and he was basically talking about like in the situations he's cried, right? And it has like the times that he cries when his daughter was born, but like no other time really. Or like, it was very it's very difficult for him to cry, but like that was like the last time that he cried. And I was saying like, oh, for a woman it's like, like my mom, she could be watching a commercial and cry. And it's like about a lost dog, and it's like it's different, you know. And so that does change, like the threshold of certain things happening for someone to behave in a certain way and debate to act or to be affected by something. And I think that it's like I think people are kind of foolish to ignore those types of things. And it's not saying that one person has more emotions than the other or whatever, but like it's how like people just physically respond differently to stimuli. And there are people who do have emotions, but they don't recognize that they have emotions. And so it's also a fact of like just how you react to, even when, like, let's say like two people are angry, right? Like there still can be a difference between how they just react to it. One person can let on that they're not angry and they can try to like, they easily brush it off, and the other person can't let it go. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, yeah. True, true, true. So I think it's just trying to find a balance of um, you know understanding that both factors are important, and but the where I have issues is where the argument tilts towards the nurture component, the cultural component so much, and
Mhm.
people are saying basically the only reason why this difference exists is because of some social construction, some socially constructed activity, or something like that. So when you take a stand like that, it's almost absolute. It's almost like there's no room for the other factors to come into play. It's this. If it wasn't this, then they would basically be the same thing. You get, and that just bothers me. That
Mhm.
really just
Yeah, yeah. It's like, that just the idea that everything is socially constructed. I really truly don't believe in that, because, a lot of like when people think like, oh, well, the only reason why we do this and this and this is because of it's arbitrary. But then it's like you don't really know how it works, right? Like, if someone believes that it's 100% arbitrary, that, well, why can't I just get free food all the time? Well, do you realize someone has to work to grow the food, to make the food, and they want to be paid, and then you pay money in order to get it, right? And so, unless you want to say that you're entitled to someone's free labor, and that they're entitled to slave, and you're going to have to create an underclass of slaves in order to get stuff for free, which not everyone's going to get something for free. Some people are just forced to work for free, which is, I would think, be a human rights violation. But it's it's just I think people who believe in the total social construction are just incredibly ignorant, about just how things work and how things have come to be, and that there is, like, if that structure breaks, then suddenly they realize, oh, that's why, if someone says, oh, it's completely arbitrary that why this gate is here, and then you remove the gate, and then suddenly, like, oh, suddenly there's a party in your front lawn, and you're like, oh, that's to delineate that this is my space and not a park, right? um so it's if everything goes right, nothing, it seems like nothing's happening at all, because these processes, these constructions are working to prevent, the physical reason why they were put in place. And again, still it's based off of reality that it's trying to prevent. And so I think when people willy-nilly think of for example, when, for the sexual revolution, and people were saying hookup culture, and, they're encouraging women to be just as sexually promiscuous as men. And then suddenly now, like, a lot of women are saying, well, I was pressured into sex. I didn't want to do this. I didn't like this. I didn't want to do this. And men are treating me so badly, but they're treating me so badly. It's like, I think maybe they're slowly realizing it's not a social construction to have women to be more conservative with who they sleep with, as opposed to just acting like men when they're not physically like men, and they don't even have the same, type of connection hormones after sex as men do, or have a lack of, right? So it's just interesting of how, when they end up finally breaking these constructions, they end up remaking these institutions. So, and I'll give another example. I remember like just watching the Chaz Chop type of situation, and how they were like, no police, no police. They took over that police station. They ended up inadvertently creating their own police, because they realized they needed someone to patrol the area to stop crime and murder. So they just created the same institution that they decried, because they realized that there is a need for it. Even if, like, yeah, they weren't officially
Who
U.S.
could have
government
who could have
police,
predicted? Who could have predicted that they would have needed police in the Charles of the so who
but
could have?
I know it's totally random. It wasn't like a utopia the moment they kicked the police out, or like, it's just interesting of where I see so many examples of people, they try to break down a system, and they just end up slowly bringing it back, because they're like, oh, that's why it was there. Oh, oops, or they just like, no, this is something totally different. And it's like, but it functions the same. So how is it different? Um, but again, I think it's again, it leads to modernity, right? Where people are just, we've had very cushy lives in which we are not aware of the things that a lot of these quote unquote social constructions are protecting us from, and then why, the stability, we've taken it for granted until we start tearing it down and realize that, oh, we actually might have to do this. Like for example, like this whole idea of like, landlords are evil, and so therefore, if you live in an apartment, you just live there, right? Like you don't have to pay anyone anything. But then when the heater breaks, who wants to fix it? Who wants to pay for a new heater? Who has the responsibility to do that?
Mm.
You know? And then suddenly then they want a landlord to fix the heater.
So it's on the sake of convenience. They want the rules to change when it's convenient for them. Now, I think there is a certain wisdom in human tradition, because these things have been sort of been tried over generations, and we sort of optimize, or human beings have evolved to optimize what is the best for the species at every particular point in time. So when women are shouting for okay, sexual liberation and all that, in a true sense, why would a patriarchal system put a limit on the sexual liberties of women? I mean, if there's anyone who should be championing for the liberties of women to have sex with just about any man, it should be the men at the helm of affairs, because that in a way that benefits them. So why would he impose such a counterintuitive restrictions on women? It's probably because, from observations, from cultural evolution, these societies have come to find out that this is the best way to run a society, that is optimal, that wouldn't break down, that would somehow protect the women, or that would somehow be good for both sexes on the long run. And if you don't have such restrictions, then people are people will become dissatisfied. And who's to say that these restrictions were not even imposed by by the women themselves, understanding the stakes that understanding what is at stake for them if they were to become that sexually liberal. So all those things, we look at it nowadays and we say that no, those traditions don't make any sense because we are somehow suddenly wiser than the last 100,000 years of human existence.
Yeah, and we have to, acknowledge like, wait, why has this thing hung around for so long? Because there are a lot of things that have changed, right? That people are more comfortable talking to strangers, right? Than probably in the past. The we have changed our practices with the times because there's more of a benefit of breaking that tradition and adopting a new practice versus like he's like, no, I don't want to drive a car, I want to keep a horse, right? It's like, that's not really going to work when you have to travel like over 25 miles, right? And you don't have a stable to keep a horse, and whatever. So but yeah, like we have to look at what has sticked around and then really understand why it has sticked around for a long time and appreciate that it does have a purpose, and then there are going to be consequences of just throwing it out completely in whole. And I can understand if like people modifying a little bit of like, okay, it is fair to have men to have some parental leave when their baby is born, right? You can't just expect a guy not to also have the chance to take some time off to even just celebrate that his baby was born. And so that makes sense if we're trying to introduce having men spend more time with their families. Or well, I mean, that was kind of the norm in the past, and so we're kind of trying to reintroduce it, thinking that it's probably something new. And so again, it's also interesting of how sometimes it seems like people are thinking like they're inventing something new, but they're basically reinventing an existing thing. I remember there was some type of article in which they were talking about women need some type of guarantee when they have a baby. And basically, this woman wrote this article not realizing that she was describing marriage. Like women should be paid to have a secure life, to have it's like there needs to be something where she has secure housing so that she's able to take care of the baby and bond with the baby, and the guy who got her pregnant should have some responsibility in that. And it's like that's marriage. It was just really interesting. It's like you don't know what you did.
What a long-winded way to refer to something that has been known for all of human history.
Yeah, so yeah, like having like men should actually have some type of commitment to a woman if he's going to have a baby with her. It's like, yeah, I think a lot of people agree to that. But but because it's like this idea of like, no, like women, they can raise kids independently, all these types of things. But then after seeing the reality of that, they're like, oh well, we need some type of guarantee. Yeah, you kind of thought you didn't need that, but you do. You're realizing now you do.
Yeah. So, Chloe, I think this would be a good place for us to uh, draw this conversation for today. We wanted to cross 1 hour. I think soon maybe we should talk about sexual dimorphism. We should talk about some of our this. I think some points came up in this conversation that we can flesh out and talk about more in some other conversation. But really appreciate your time today, and I do hope that we don't have any glitches, 2 weeks from now when we're having our next conversation. So,
Yeah.
any final thoughts on this before we end?
No, I think it was good. Definitely, and I joke all the time of like, oh, time's a social construction. Like, and it's like a joke if someone's like late or something like that. It's a social construction. It doesn't really matter. But like, at the end of the day, like, you
we
know,
could we could literally change the time if the event was supposed to start by 10 and by 2 no one had come. We we could literally say 2 o'clock is 10 o'clock, and it is
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
Exactly. But like I feel like when people say things are social construction, it means that it doesn't matter. But there are plenty of examples of where even something if it's a social construction, it does matter a lot. And if we don't follow these things, it we realize that they were created for a reason because they are based on some type of physical reality or a need that we have that we need to do, like connection or like making sure that work is done on time, making sure work is done well, making sure that we make sure that people are holding up their agreements, their bargains. Like the whole court system is a social construction, but I think we like making sure that the rule of law is enforced and people aren't allowed to scam people, steal money, and get away with it. So yeah, I don't like the idea of that claiming things that are social constructions. It means that they don't matter. They actually, if people care about them, it means that they matter a lot because there is a need for them.
Yep.
They were created for a
All,
reason.
all right, Chloe. So, thank you very much for this conversation, and I'll catch you in another lecture.
All right.
So, it's goodbye for now.
Bye. Talk to you later.